The Shunned Princess. The grand hall of the Ziyari Palace was a sight of unmatched beauty. Its walls shimmered with iridescent crystals, reflecting the endless galaxies beyond the windows. The air was filled with soft melodies of alien instruments, but none of it mattered to Lyraya. She sat alone at the edge of the room, her delicate hands resting on her lap. Her unseeing eyes stared straight ahead, but she could feel the stares of the crowd burning into her. Lyraya, the blind princess of Ziyara, was not just ignored, she was shunned. Her people, the Ziyari, were a proud race known for their extraordinary vision. They could see colors that no other species could perceive, patterns in the stars that mapped out ancient secrets. To them, sight was everything. A blind Ziyari was considered broken, useless, and cursed. She had once been a star in this very hall. Before the illness stole her sight, Lyraya was admired for her beauty and grace. The people adored her. But now, she was a shadow of her former self in their eyes. Even her family kept their distance, ashamed of what she had become. The grand doors of the hall creaked open, and the hum of conversation grew louder. Delegates from across the galaxy arrived for the peace summit, their strange shapes and sizes filling the room with life. Lyraya's heart sank. She hated these events. They were a cruel reminder of her isolation, surrounded by beings who could see the world she could no longer experience. She listened to the whispers around her. "Why is she even here?" a sharp voice muttered. "It's embarrassing," another replied. "The princess is no longer fit to represent us." Lyraya tightened her grip on her lap, her nails pressing into her palms. She had heard it all before. No matter how much she tried to ignore it, the words cut deep every time. She wanted to leave, to escape to her private chambers where she could be alone. But duty held her in place. Even if her people had given up on her, she still had her title. She was still a princess. As she sat in silence, she felt a strange energy enter the room. It was a presence unlike any other, a warmth that stood out among the cold indifference of the crowd. It was human. The humans were newcomers to the intergalactic stage. Their technology was primitive compared to the Ziyari, and their lifespans were laughably short. But there was something about them that intrigued Lyraya. They were bold, stubborn, and unyielding in ways that her people were not. The human ambassador, Captain Jack Carter, was introduced to the assembly. His boots clacked against the crystalline floor as he walked confidently into the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an air of determination. Unlike the other guests who avoided her, Jack's gaze seemed to lock onto Lyraya almost instantly. To Lyraya's surprise, she felt him approach her. The warmth of his presence grew closer until he stood just a few steps away. For a moment, she thought he might turn away like everyone else, but instead, he spoke. "Princess Lyraya." His voice was deep and kind, with a softness that caught her off guard. She turned her head toward him, startled. It had been so long since someone had addressed her directly, without pity or scorn. "Yes," she replied, her voice cautious. "I'm Jack Carter," he said, "captain of the Stellar Unity. I couldn't help but notice you sitting here alone." Lyraya stiffened. Was he mocking her? No, there was no malice in his tone. "Most people don't notice me at all," she said, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. Jack chuckled, but it wasn't the condescending laugh she had expected. It was warm and genuine. "Well, I guess I'm not like most people." The simple statement made her pause. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of curiosity. "Why are you talking to me, Captain Carter?" she asked. "You must know who I am, or rather, what I am." Jack pulled up a chair and sat beside her, ignoring the disapproving glances from the Ziyari nobles. "I do know who you are," he said. "And I also know that being different doesn't make you less important." Lyraya's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever said that to her before. The Ziyari measured worth by physical perfection, by how well one could serve the collective. But Jack's words carried a truth that resonated deep within her. "You don't even know me," she said, her voice softer now. "No," Jack admitted, "but I'd like to, if that's all right with you." Loraya didn't know how to respond. She had spent so long being ignored, dismissed, and ridiculed that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, not for her title or her flaws, but for who she truly was. Before she could answer, a voice rang out from across the room. "Captain Carter, is there a problem?" It was a Zoyari official, his tone icy and unwelcoming. Jack glanced back at the official but didn't move. "No problem at all," he said. Then he turned back to Loraya and smiled. "I'll be around if you want to talk." For the first time in years, Loraya felt a spark of something she thought she had lost. A human connection. Loraya had never expected anyone to approach her like that. Captain Jack Carter's presence lingered in her mind long after he had walked away. No one had ever dared to speak to her like a person before, not in this way, not without the weight of judgment or pity. His words, simple and genuine, echoed through her thoughts. "I'd like to get to know you," he had said. It was a statement so unexpected, so different from the cold silence or cruel whispers she had grown accustomed to. Loraya sat at the edge of the hall, her fingers unconsciously tracing the cool surface of the crystal table in front of her. She wasn't sure what to make of Jack. Perhaps he was just another person who would tire of her, just another face in a crowd that would eventually ignore her when the novelty wore off. But there was something different about him. She could sense it, even without her sight. The soft hum of conversations surrounded her, a blur of voices that no longer held any meaning. She could feel the tension in the air, the way people moved around her as if she were invisible. The Zoyari had never been kind to her after her blindness. They didn't know how to understand someone like her, someone who couldn't see the world the way they did. But Jack Carter wasn't like the others. His presence was warm, steady, like a beacon in the dark. She didn't notice when Jack returned to her side. The hum of the crowd shifted slightly, and his voice broke through the noise again. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his tone casual, but with an undercurrent of sincerity. Loraya turned her head slightly, feeling the faint change in the air as he settled beside her. "You already did," she said with a small, dry smile. "I suppose you don't care much for the formalities of our people's customs." Jack chuckled. "I've never been good with that sort of thing. They told me I should stick to protocol, but, well, I'm not a fan of the usual way of doing things. Besides, what's the point of ceremony if you can't speak honestly?" Loraya's heart fluttered slightly at his words. Honesty. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her like that. The Zoyari people only cared for what she represented, her title, her royal bloodline. The princess was a symbol, not a person. But Jack didn't care about any of that. He didn't care that she was blind, that she was seen as useless. He cared about what was inside, about her mind, her spirit. "You're not afraid of me?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Most people are. They can't stand to be around someone like me." Jack's smile softened, and he leaned slightly closer. "Why should I be? You've got a mind, right? A powerful one, too, from what I hear. It doesn't matter to me what you can or can't see. What matters is who you are." Loraya couldn't help but feel a warmth spreading through her chest at his words. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. They had always assumed that her blindness meant she was weak or incomplete, but Jack saw her differently. He saw her as someone who could still contribute, someone who had potential. "I've heard things about you, Captain Carter," Loraya said, her curiosity growing, "that you're different from the others. But why? Why are you so willing to speak to someone like me? Someone who can't even see?" Jack's gaze softened, and for a moment, he seemed to be lost in thought. "Maybe it's because I know what it's like to be judged. I'm not perfect, either. I lost a limb during a mission a few years back. It's not the same as blindness, I know. But I've been through something where people thought I was broken, that I couldn't do the things I used to. And you know what? I found out I could still do everything I wanted to do. I just had to find a new way." Loraya felt a strange sense of connection to him, a bond formed not out of pity, but of understanding. Jack had suffered too, in his own way. He had faced hardship and come through it, just as she had learned to live with her blindness, though not without pain. "But I'm not like you," Loraya said softly. "I don't have the strength you have. I can't just find a new way like you did." Jack reached over and placed a hand gently on hers, a simple, yet comforting gesture. "You'd be surprised at how strong you are, Loraya. You've lived with this for how long? You're still here, still standing. That makes you stronger than most people I know." Loraya felt something in her stir, a feeling she hadn't had in a long time. Hope. It was such a foreign concept to her now, but Jack had a way of making it feel real again. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she wasn't just the blind princess who was cast aside. She was someone who mattered, someone who was seen for who she truly was. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She wasn't sure if she was thanking him for his words or for the simple act of seeing her. Maybe both. Jack gave her hand a reassuring squeeze before standing up. "You're welcome. I'll be around if you want to talk more. No pressure. I just wanted to make sure you know that you're not invisible to me, princess." As he walked away, Loraya sat there, her thoughts swirling. She had always felt like an outsider in her own world, but Jack had made her feel seen. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to make her blindness work for her, just as Jack had found a way to adapt to his own struggles. Standing up for Loraya. The days after Jack's first conversation with Loraya were strange, yet oddly comforting. She found herself thinking about him more often, wondering what had driven him to approach her in the first place. In the midst of the gala, the peace talks, and the endless sea of stares, Jack's words continued to echo in her mind. "You're not invisible to me." It was a thought that gave her strength, though she had no idea how to use it. The Ziyari people, with their sharp minds and unspoken rules, had always viewed her as weak, something to be discarded and forgotten. She was just a blind princess, a symbol of something broken, a stain on their perfect world. The Peace Summit had entered its second day, and Loraya found herself in the same position as always, alone. The Ziyari delegates mingled with the other species in the vast hall, discussing treaties, trade, and alliances. They spoke in grand, eloquent terms, all while glancing at her with disdain. There was no real conversation with her. No one cared to even acknowledge her presence. She had grown used to it, but it still hurt. But that day, as the conversation grew louder and more heated between the representatives, something shifted. Jack entered the hall again, his confident strides cutting through the crowd. As he walked, his eyes sought out Loraya, and the moment their gazes met, something unusual happened. For the first time in what felt like years, Loraya didn't feel like a ghost. Jack's smile was genuine as he made his way over to her, cutting through the crowd, ignoring the murmurs and stares of the Ziyari delegates. "Princess Loraya," Jack said warmly, his voice cutting through the tension in the air. "It's good to see you again. How are you today?" Loraya blinked in surprise. She had not expected him to seek her out again, especially not in the middle of the summit. She was just about to respond when a voice from across the room interrupted her. "Captain Carter," a Ziyari council member called, his tone dripping with contempt. "Might I remind you that you are not here to entertain the princess? We have serious matters to discuss." The council member's voice was sharp, a command laced with authority. The room fell silent, and Loraya could feel the tension building. She knew this moment all too well. She could already feel the judgment rising from the Ziyari delegates. They were uncomfortable with Jack's continued attention toward her. Jack's expression didn't waver. He turned his head slightly, his eyes locking onto the council member with a steady gaze. "I am well aware of the matters at hand, but I would argue that this is exactly the kind of conversation that matters. Princess Loraya has as much a right to be heard as anyone else here." Loraya's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't used to being defended, especially not in front of so many people. She had always been the one to retreat, to stay silent, to fade into the background. But Jack's words were strong, unwavering. He wasn't backing down. The Ziyari council member frowned, clearly unaccustomed to having his authority questioned. With all due respect, Captain, the princess has no real function in these talks. Her blindness makes her ineffective. The words stung like a slap to the face. Laraya's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she felt her old self, broken, unseen, worthless. The same feeling she had buried deep inside surfaced with a painful clarity. They were right, weren't they? Blindness was a weakness. She had no place in a world that prized perfection and strength above all else. But then something in Jack's voice broke through her spiral of doubt. He stepped closer to the council member, his face calm, but his eyes sharp, filled with a quiet intensity. "I disagree," Jack said, his voice carrying across the room. "I've seen what this princess is capable of. Just because she can't see the world the way you do doesn't mean she's less capable. She has strengths that none of you understand, and if you choose to ignore that, it's your loss." The room fell deathly silent. The Ziyari delegates looked around at each other, uneasy. It was not often that someone, especially an outsider, stood up to their council, especially on behalf of someone like Laraya. But Jack didn't stop there. Laraya's gifts go far beyond what you can see with your eyes. Her mind is sharp. Her ability to sense energy and emotions is something none of you can comprehend. But it's real. And you'd be foolish to disregard it. Laraya felt her heart race. She had never heard anyone speak about her abilities in such a way before. She had always hidden her unique gift, her ability to sense the energy and emotions of those around her, because she knew how the Ziyari would react. They didn't value what they couldn't see with their eyes. But Jack saw something in her, something real. "I'm not here to argue about her blindness," Jack continued, turning to face the entire room. "I'm here to remind you that being different doesn't make someone lesser. If you want to build a lasting peace, you need to understand that. You need to see beyond the surface." The council member who had spoken earlier scowled, but the others in the room remained quiet, their expressions thoughtful. There was a moment of hesitation before the room began to stir again, but this time, the whispers were different. There was a subtle shift in the air, a quiet realization that perhaps Jack had a point. For Laraya, it was like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had always felt small, invisible in the eyes of her people. But here was someone, a human, no less, who saw her, who stood by her side when everyone else turned away. It was a feeling she had longed for, but had never truly believed she could experience again. Jack turned back to her, offering her a small, knowing smile. "I told you I wouldn't leave you alone," he said softly. Laraya couldn't help but smile back, a sense of warmth blooming in her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She felt seen. Uncovering the threat. The peace summit had grown even more tense as the day wore on. Laraya, still sitting at the edge of the vast hall, had begun to notice something strange. The discussions that had once seemed so diplomatic were now laced with something darker. While most of the Ziyari delegates kept their conversations calm and composed, there were moments when their voices dropped to hushed whispers, as if hiding something from the rest of the room. Even the air felt heavier, charged with an unknown tension that only heightened Laraya's growing unease. Jack had remained by her side for much of the day, offering her companionship and quiet conversation amidst the clamor of politics. His presence had a calming effect on her, a steady anchor in a sea of uncertainty. But today, something was different. She could feel it. Laraya's energy-sensing abilities had always been her greatest asset, even if she had hidden them from most of her people. She had learned to tune into the subtle pulses of emotions, the shifts in energy around her. At first, she had only used it to gauge the mood of the room, to navigate her surroundings when her sight failed her. But lately, her sensitivity had become more attuned to other things she couldn't explain. Something felt wrong. The energy around her had shifted, becoming more erratic and tense as the hours passed. There was a disturbance in the air, like a storm was brewing just beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. The delegates, the peacekeepers, even the foreign diplomats, all of them seemed on edge, their emotions flickering between excitement and fear. Jack noticed it too. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked, leaning in close enough for her to hear over the low murmur of voices. Lariah nodded, her brow furrowed. "Something's wrong. I can't explain it, but the atmosphere is changing. It's like there's something hidden here, something the others aren't aware of." Jack's expression grew more serious. He had grown to trust Lariah's instincts, and if she said something was wrong, he believed her. "What do you think it is?" "I don't know," Lariah replied quietly. "But whatever it is, it's not good." Jack turned to look at the crowd, scanning the room for any sign of unusual activity. The Ziyari were still deep in their discussions, and the human delegates were either engaged in conversation or quietly observing. But Jack's eyes narrowed as he noticed a pair of delegates from the Caldari system lingering near a large ornate door at the back of the hall. The Caldari were known for their mysterious ways, often acting as neutral parties in galactic affairs. But today, their behavior was anything but neutral. "They're up to something," Jack muttered under his breath, his eyes never leaving the pair. "I've seen that look before. It's the kind of look people get right before they do something they don't want anyone to see." Lariah focused her senses on the Caldari delegates. Their emotions were masked, their energy controlled, too controlled. They were hiding something they didn't want anyone else to know. And Lariah could feel it deep within her. "They're not alone," she said softly. "There's someone else behind them, someone hiding in the shadows." Jack turned to look at her, his gaze sharp. "Can you pinpoint where?" Lariah closed her eyes for a moment, focusing deeply on the subtle vibrations in the air around her. She could feel the faintest ripple of energy, a disturbance at the farthest corner of the room, near the palace's energy vaults. The Caldari were standing just outside of the entrance to the vault, and behind them, the cloaked figure stood in the shadows, watching the rest of the room carefully. "I think they're after something in the vault," Lariah said, her voice tense. "Something important, something the rest of the summit doesn't know about." Jack straightened, his expression hardening. The vault contains some of Ziara's most sensitive information. If they get their hands on it. Lariah didn't need to finish the sentence. She knew what the consequences would be. The vault housed data on military strategies, weapon systems, and other top-secret technologies that, if fallen into the wrong hands, could bring about catastrophic consequences for Ziara and the rest of the galaxy. "We need to stop them," Jack said, determination flooding his voice. But Lariah's heart sank. "How? We're outnumbered, and the palace is filled with guards. We'll never get past them." Jack's jaw clenched. "We don't need to go through them. We need to find a way to stop the Caldari without anyone noticing." Lariah nodded, already thinking through the possibilities. She could feel the energy surrounding the palace's vault. It was pulsing with a steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of the building itself. But something else was now there, an undercurrent of dark energy that wasn't supposed to be there. It was as though the vault's protection system was being tampered with, slowly but surely. "I can sense it," Lariah said. "They've already begun to access the vault. But I can also sense its defenses. They're just starting to weaken. If we act quickly, we can stop them before they break through." Jack looked around, scanning for any possible escape routes. The Caldari delegates were still too far from the vault entrance, but their intentions were clear. They didn't care about diplomacy or peace. They were here for something far more dangerous. "We need to move, now," Jack said. "I'll create a diversion. You get close to the vault and use your abilities to block their progress. We can do this." Lariah's heart raced. She had never been in a situation like this before, never had to use her abilities for something so dangerous. But Jack's trust in her, his unwavering belief in her, gave her the strength she needed. With a nod, Lariah stood up, her senses already alert to the energy flowing through the palace. Jack moved with purpose, weaving through the crowd, as Lariah made her way to the back of the room, toward the vault. Her fingers brushed the walls as she moved, guiding her through the chaos. She could feel the Kaldari delegates now, their energy like a dark cloud, closing in on the vault. She had to stop them before it was too late. The dangerous mission. Lariah's heart pounded in her chest as she moved quickly, but quietly through the shadowed hallways of the palace. Her senses were on high alert, her mind focused entirely on the task ahead. The walls of the Grand Palace, normally a source of comfort, now felt like a maze, intricate, ancient, and full of secrets. As her fingers brushed against the cool stone, she could almost feel the tension in the air, thickening with each passing moment. Behind her, she could hear Jack's voice, low and steady, directing their movements. They had agreed on a plan. Jack would create a distraction at the summit, drawing the attention of the Ziyari guards and diplomats, while Lariah used her unique abilities to sneak closer to the vault. The Kaldari delegates, unaware of their pursuit, had already begun their attempt to break into the vault, and Lariah could sense the faint but growing disturbance in the palace's protective energy field. The vault's defenses were weakening, but there was still time to stop them. "Stay close," Jack's voice cut through the silence. "I've got your back." Lariah nodded, though Jack couldn't see her. She didn't need to answer. His voice alone brought her a measure of calm in the midst of the rising chaos. She had never been in a situation like this before. Never had her abilities been tested in such a dangerous way. But there was no turning back now. She was not going to let the Kaldari succeed. The peace of Ziyara, the safety of the galaxy, depended on her. As they rounded the corner, Lariah felt the energy shift around her. The corridor leading to the vault was just ahead, and the air seemed to grow colder, denser. It wasn't just the walls and the floor now. It was the very atmosphere, alive with the low hum of the palace's protective systems, beginning to falter. Jack had said he would create a diversion, but Lariah didn't need to hear the commotion in the distance to know that he was doing his job well. The sound of hurried footsteps and shouts echoed from the summit hall. The Ziyari were being distracted, drawn away by Jack's bold actions. But now it was up to Lariah to act swiftly. She was almost at the vault, and she could feel the pulse of the energy field growing weaker with each step she took. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, but Lariah's senses guided her. She could almost see the path ahead, despite her blindness. Her fingers brushed against the cold stone walls as she focused on the energy around her. The closer she got to the vault, the stronger the disruption felt. The Kaldari were almost there. She could feel their dark intentions, their calculated moves as they worked in tandem, just out of sight. They weren't just trying to break into the vault. They were trying to disable the entire system. Lariah's breath caught in her throat. If they succeeded in breaking through the vault's energy shields, Ziyara's most dangerous secrets would be exposed. The consequences would be disastrous. She had to stop them. She could hear the muffled voices now, just ahead. The Kaldari delegates were speaking in low tones, their words clipped and hurried. They were close, so close. Lariah's hand reached out, steadying herself as she felt the vibrations of their footsteps approaching. Her mind raced, her senses finely tuned to every flicker of energy in the air. There was no time to waste. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She focused on the flow of energy, on the power that connected the palace to its core systems. She had always been able to sense emotions, subtle changes in the atmosphere. But this was different. It was as if she could feel the very heartbeat of the palace itself, pulsing beneath her fingertips. The vault's defenses were weakening, but they were not completely gone yet. Lariah reached out with her mind, feeling the resistance, the layers of energy that protected the vault. She closed her eyes, even though she couldn't see, and concentrated deeply. A hum vibrated through her bones as she extended her senses further, pushing against the crackling energy field. Slowly, carefully, she focused on sealing the weak points, strengthening the barriers that the Kaldari were attempting to breach. She could feel the pressure mounting on her, the weight of her responsibility bearing down on her shoulders. But the moment she pushed against the energy field, something unexpected happened. A jolt of pain shot through her mind, as though the energy was fighting back. It was too much for her to hold on her own. The Caldari delegates were close now, their presence drawing nearer with every heartbeat. Larea gasped, her head spinning. She needed help. She couldn't do this alone. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her, and she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Jack. He had reached her just in time. His presence was like a grounding force, steadying her as she struggled to maintain control over the energy flow. She could feel his steady breathing beside her, his unwavering support. "I've got you," Jack said, his voice calm and firm. "I won't let you do this alone." Larea nodded, relief flooding through her. She hadn't realized how much she had relied on Jack's belief in her until now. They were a team, and together, they could do this. With Jack's help, Larea focused her energy again, pushing harder against the defenses. This time, it was easier. Jack's presence next to her seemed to amplify her abilities, creating a synergy between them that she hadn't expected. Together, they formed a link, channeling their combined strength into the energy field. The crackling of the defenses grew louder, but this time, it was not the Caldari breaking through. It was Larea and Jack, reinforcing the barrier, strengthening it against the intruders. Slowly, the energy field began to stabilize, the weak points closing one by one. But just as they thought they had succeeded, a voice called out from behind them. "Not so fast," the voice said, cold and sharp. Larea and Jack turned to face the source of the voice. The Caldari delegates had found them. And now, they were ready to fight, rising as a leader. The Caldari delegates stood before Larea and Jack, their expressions cold and calculating. The tension in the air was palpable, like a storm about to break. They had been caught in the act, attempting to breach the vault's defenses, and now they were furious. Larea could feel their energy rippling through the air, a dark, oppressive force that seemed to weigh down on her. The Caldari were not just skilled diplomats. They were trained in the arts of deception, manipulation, and subterfuge. They had always known how to get what they wanted, no matter the cost. "Step aside," one of the Caldari delegates said, his voice sharp and commanding. "You cannot stop us. This vault holds secrets that belong to the galaxy, and we are taking them." Larea felt the anger rising in her chest. For too long, she had been made to feel small, to feel as though her blindness made her weak. But now, standing beside Jack, she felt something awakening inside her, something fierce and powerful. She wasn't just a blind princess. She was a leader, and she wasn't about to let these strangers destroy everything her people had worked for. "I will not step aside," Larea said, her voice steady, though it carried an edge of defiance. She had never spoken with such conviction before, but in this moment, something inside her had changed. She could feel the weight of her title, the responsibility she carried as the Princess of Ziara. But now it wasn't just about her. It was about the future of her people, the safety of the galaxy, and the importance of standing up for what was right. Jack stood beside her, his expression just as resolute. "You're not getting through that vault," he said, his voice low but firm. "And if you think we're going to let you steal whatever's in there, you're wrong." The Caldari delegate sneered, clearly unimpressed by their defiance. "You think you can stop us?" one of them mocked, stepping forward with an air of superiority. "You're nothing but a blind princess and a human soldier. What can you possibly do to us?" Larea didn't flinch at the insult. Instead, she squared her shoulders and took a deep breath, drawing strength from the quiet power that had begun to rise within her. "I may be blind," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "but I see more than you think. I see the truth that you're trying to hide, and I will stop you." Jack's gaze shifted to Larea, a quiet respect in his eyes. He could see it now, the shift in her, the moment when she had stopped being the fragile princess who hid in the shadows and became the fierce leader her people needed. Together, they were strong. The Caldari delegates glanced at each other, uncertainty flickering in their eyes for just a moment. They had underestimated her, and now they realized their mistake. But it was too late. Lyraya wasn't just a figurehead. She was a force to be reckoned with. "You're making a mistake," one of the Caldari said, his voice colder now, full of menace. "You don't know the power you're standing in the way of." Lyraya's hand tightened into a fist, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of her abilities surging through her. She could sense the energy around them, strong, crackling, alive. And she could feel the Caldari's every move, every intention. They were not just thieves. They were dangerous, willing to destroy everything to get what they wanted. And she wasn't going to let them. "I don't need to know your power," Lyraya said, her voice unwavering, "because I have my own." She reached out with her senses, extending them beyond the vault, beyond the walls of the palace. She could feel the pulse of the Ziyari energy field, and she knew exactly how to use it. Slowly, she began to manipulate the energy around her, drawing it into a force of her own making. The crackling energy surged, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with power. The Caldari delegates recoiled, their confidence faltering as they sensed the shift. They had underestimated her gift, assuming her blindness made her powerless. But now, they could feel it. Lyraya wasn't just another blind princess. She was a threat. Jack, seeing the change in Lyraya, stepped forward with newfound resolve. "If you think you can take what's ours, think again. The Ziyari won't let you destroy what we've built. We'll fight for it." The Caldari delegates exchanged uneasy glances, but Lyraya could feel the fear in them. They had expected a fight with the palace guards, perhaps, but they hadn't counted on Lyraya's strength or Jack's willingness to stand by her side. Suddenly, the air shifted again, and the entire palace seemed to hum with energy. Lyraya felt it before she saw it. The protective field around the vault was restored, its power amplifying, becoming stronger than ever. The Caldari delegates, realizing they had been outplayed, turned toward the vault, but it was too late. They had no way to breach it now. The Caldari leader's face twisted with frustration, but there was nothing he could do. The vault's defenses were once again impenetrable, and Lyraya had proven that she wasn't the helpless princess they had thought her to be. She had risen to the occasion, wielding her abilities with the grace and strength of a true leader. "You'll regret this," the Caldari leader snarled, but his voice lacked the confidence it had held before. Lyraya didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. As the Caldari delegates were escorted away by palace guards, Lyraya stood tall, her heart racing with adrenaline. She had done it. She had defended Ziyara, protected the vault, and shown the galaxy what she was capable of. She had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that being blind didn't make her weak. It made her strong in ways they couldn't even begin to understand. Jack turned to her, a proud smile on his face. "You did it, Lyraya. You showed them who you really are." Lyraya looked around the hall, her heart swelling with newfound confidence. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a leader. And the galaxy was about to learn that nothing could stop her. A new beginning. The hall was quiet now, save for the soft murmur of the guards moving the Caldari delegates away, their defeated expressions a stark contrast to the self-assured arrogance they had entered with. Lyraya stood tall, her chest rising with every breath, as the weight of what had just happened settled on her. The vault was safe, the peace talks had continued, and she had proven that she was far more than just a blind princess who sat in the shadows. She had faced down a crisis, used her abilities in a way she never thought possible, and emerged victorious. The Ziyari people, once quick to turn their backs on her, would never look at her the same way again. For the first time, Lyraya felt a deep sense of pride in who she was, not despite her blindness, but because of it. Her blindness had taught her to see the world in ways others could never understand, to sense the things others overlooked, to hear the truths buried beneath the surface. Jack stood beside her, his calm presence a steadying force as the room slowly began to return to normal. The tension had dissipated, but there was a new energy in the air now, a hum of excitement and realization. The Ziyari council members were still whispering among themselves, no doubt discussing the failure of the Kaldari and the surprising strength of the princess they had so long disregarded. Laraya's thoughts were interrupted by a soft, almost hesitant voice. "Princess Laraya." Came the voice of one of the Ziyari council members, a man with silver-gray hair and sharp, calculating eyes. He was one of the few who had never spoken against her directly, but she knew he had been just as indifferent to her as the rest of them. "Yes." Laraya turned to face him, her posture firm. She had nothing left to hide, nothing left to fear. The power of her own presence, of her abilities, was more than enough to meet him eye to eye. The councilman seemed to hesitate for a moment before speaking again. We were wrong to doubt you." Laraya raised an eyebrow, surprised by the admission. "You were." He nodded, his expression somewhat somber. "We believed that your blindness made you weak, that it made you lesser. But now we see that it is your greatest strength. You protected the vault. You protected our future. You have earned our respect." Laraya looked around the room, noting the quiet nods of approval from other council members who had once dismissed her without a second thought. It wasn't just one man admitting his mistake, it was the entire room. They were seeing her for the first time, not as a princess to be pitied, but as a leader to be respected. "I never needed your respect," Laraya replied, her voice steady but full of resolve. "I needed you to see the truth, to see that I am not defined by what I cannot do, but by what I can." Jack stepped forward, standing by her side. "She's right. Laraya is a force to be reckoned with. The Ziyari have a rare gift in their princess. Don't waste it." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared to challenge the truth in Jack's words. There was a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement in the room. They could no longer deny it. Laraya had shown them all what true strength looked like. As the meeting continued, Laraya found herself standing taller than she ever had before. She wasn't just a figurehead anymore, she was a leader. She could feel the respect growing around her, not because of her royal bloodline, but because of her actions, her bravery, and her ability to rise above the limitations that others had placed on her. In the days that followed, the peace talks resumed. The Kaldari were forced to return empty-handed, their plans thwarted by the very people they had underestimated. The Ziyari Council, now more united than ever, began to openly recognize Laraya's importance, not just as a princess, but as a true leader of her people. They even began to discuss including her in future negotiations, knowing that her perspective, one born from her unique abilities, would be invaluable. Laraya's life had changed in ways she couldn't have imagined just a week ago. The weight of her responsibilities was still heavy, but it no longer felt like a burden. With Jack by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. She had learned that leadership wasn't about perfection, it was about courage, about standing up when the world seemed determined to knock you down. And for the first time, Laraya felt as though she had the courage to lead her people. She stood on the balcony of the palace later that evening, gazing out at the stars that stretched out beyond the horizon. The galaxy, so vast and full of unknowns, seemed a little less daunting now. She had once thought that her blindness had made her weak, that it had held her back. But now, she realized it had made her stronger, more attuned to the world around her, more capable of sensing what others could not. Jack joined her on the balcony, standing beside her in comfortable silence. "You did it, Laraya. You showed them all who you really are." Laraya smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. "I didn't just show them. I showed myself." Jack's smile mirrored hers. "I knew you had it in you." Laraya turned to face him, her expression softening. "Thank you, Jack, for believing in me when no one else did. I couldn't have done this without you." Jack gave her a small nod, his eyes full of warmth. "You're stronger than you think, Loraya. I just gave you the push you needed." Loraya smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She didn't need to be the perfect princess or the flawless leader. She just needed to be herself, the person who had fought for her people, the person who had finally learned to trust in her own strength. The stars above them twinkled brightly, as if reflecting the new path ahead. It was a path that Loraya would walk with her head held high, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready. She was more than just a blind princess. She was a leader, a warrior, and a force to be reckoned with. And the galaxy would never forget her name.